Hey guys. Google's old motto was "Don't be evil." Funny how this worked out. Their belief that they should not only be the controller of all of the world's information, but also the arbiters of truth, has led them to become the most disturbingly influential company in world history. And I don't need to tell you that they have not wielded their power benevolently. We're in an unprecedented situation with Google. They control such a large share of the distribution of all known information. There are over 2 trillion Google searches a year on more than 500,000 servers. There are now billions of smartphones activated. Some estimate that half of the world's population has a smartphone. Google has the most valuable brand in the world, which is estimated at over $200 billion. Further, it is a well-diversified company. This is from The Guardian. In the words of former Intel chief executive Andy Grove, it is increasingly seen as a company on steroids with a finger in every industry. Google has acquired dozens of companies in the past decade and has licensed hundreds of patents. They have launched a venture capital arm to invest in multiple industries, up-and-coming industries and technologies, and safe, grounded industries as well. And they're engaging in extensive vertical integration, which is the real reason that they've acquired so many other companies and have patented so many things. Google wants to own all of our technology and the data that corresponds to our digital footprint. They also want to own the hardware, the infrastructure, and they want to be the providers of our news, our entertainment. They want to be the company that controls all information that we consume and what information we consume. They already track all our physical movement and online behavior, plus they've mapped huge portions of the world. The data that they've accumulated is unprecedented in scale and in depth. But what are they most interested in? Data collection on an individual level. Why? In 2015, Google's revenue was $74.5 billion. Around $67.4 billion was advertising revenue, which amounts to about 90% of their total revenue for the entire year of 2015. We've all traded convenience for privacy, and we felt safe because of the numbers. Everyone was doing it. Millions, hundreds of millions. Now billions of people. And it was fine because of the scale. That gave us a false sense of security. Why would they hone in on us individually if they have so much data collected on all of us? It wasn't until they decided that certain people can no longer voice opinions that we realized what hot water we're in. Although this was completely predictable, merely based on the fact that we knowingly decided to forsake our security for convenience by trusting a faceless, self-interested corporation. Additionally, we had plenty of warning shots in the form of YouTube's increasingly Orwellian terms of service, and most recently with this James Damore situation. A few weeks ago, as you know, James Damore was fired for writing a well-supported memo in response to Google reaching out to employees for feedback, in which he outlines a few generally agreed upon reasons that women do not choose tech jobs, in an attempt to explain why it is expected for the tech industry to be male-dominated. And as to say, Google, this isn't because you have sexist hiring practices. As expected, there was a huge public backlash, and James was called a sexist, racist white man. Also, as expected, he was then fired spectacularly, and he's been doing the rounds in alternative media. I've linked a few of his interviews below, one with Stefan Molyneux and Jordan Peterson. But he did appear on Tucker Carlson, and he discussed the terms of his firing.
They haven't really given any details. They've just, the entire time, either just called me names, shamed me, or just made broad generalizations saying that what I was saying was pseudoscience.
What did they say to you when they canned you? When they called you in, how did the conversation go? What was the justification for ending your career at Google?
So the official justification was perpetuating gender stereotypes.
For millions of people that have known that Google is collecting all of our personal information and even that they're selling it, but have been able to rationalize because of the convenience that it offers, this shook them awake a little bit. I think it made people realize that the impossibly large and industry-spanning company that also is our primary provider of information does not recognize basic, plain truths within its own ranks. And worse, fires people for stating obvious things that are disruptive to their delusional corporate culture. It also made people see that Google rejects meritocracy in favor of a staunch diversity initiative that no one is allowed to criticize. This is an excellent way to gauge corporate failure. Invariably, your quality of staff will eventually suffer. Right now, Google employees are top-notch because it is still a very prestigious place to work and it's still very high-paying. But what will happen as their reputation for intolerance prevails and becomes the public focus rather than their commitment limit to innovation. They can be very diversified in terms of industry, and we can be very dependent on their products. But what will happen when people learn to adapt, when they're fed up with the privacy violations and information collection, and they seek alternatives? Also, people that truly want to be innovators will not want to work at a company that will stifle them or fire them for stating plain truths. And God forbid you're a tech genius in your right wing. You would never even bother applying to Google. It's become abundantly clear through YouTube's partnering with the ADL to remove conservative content that is not in violation of their terms of service, that Google has launched a full-scale attack on the right and internally are engaging in ridiculous levels of delusion about gender, human nature, race, sexism, and a multitude of other remaining darling issues of the regressive left. We've been aware for several years that Google's ranking algorithm, which has long since been inconsistent, at some point began to return leftist-run news aggregates and similar sites at the top of search results. In April or so, we had some more solid evidence explaining Google's bias, even though people have been certain this was occurring for years and years. Bloomberg Technology reported in April, Google isn't planning to rid fake news from its search results, but it's trying to purge it from the top. The Alphabet Inc. company is making a rare, sweeping change to the algorithm behind its powerful search engine to demote misleading, false, and offensive articles online. Google is also setting new rules encouraging its raters, the 10,000-plus staff that assess search results, to flag web pages that host hoaxes, conspiracy theories, and what the company calls low-quality content. Yeah, I bet those 10,000 people have no political or personal biases that are affecting their decision-making. We all did little tests during the campaign to see what came up first when you Google things like Trump or Hillary. Without fail, Hillary would return positively slanted results in the top rankings, and Trump would return negative results in the top rankings. Your typical leftist publications would almost always be on the top: HuffPo, New York Times, your usual suspects. I am very convinced that they did their darndest to help Hillary Clinton out. And their algorithm and ranking system has fallen under suspicion for a few other reasons, most notably the $2.7 billion issued in fines by the EU. This is from the Washington Post. The European Union's antitrust chief hit Google with a record $2.7 billion fine Tuesday, saying the powerful web search leader illegally steered users towards its comparison shopping site and warning that other parts of Google's business were in the crosshairs. The fine is the largest the EU has levied against a company for abusing its dominant position, and it marked the latest confrontation over business practices between EU regulators and American tech giants. Google, which is considering an appeal, issued a statement minutes after the EU announcement saying its shopping site helps both consumers and advertisers. When you shop online, you want to find the products you're looking for quickly and easily, and advertisers want to promote those same products, Kent Walker, Google's senior vice president, said. That's why Google shows shopping ads connecting our users with thousands of advertisers, large and small, in ways that are useful for both. We respectfully disagree with the conclusions announced today. Even in Google's statement about this, they're just using the same old excuse that they always do, which is that they're trying to better tailor your internet experience to your needs. But what they're really doing is exploiting personal data that the average person is unaware is even being collected to better match advertisements and to increase their share of advertising revenue. They are using personal data to manipulate search rankings. This has become a bit of a cliche in certain internet communities, but for my normie audience that may be unaware of this, and for my parents, I want to show you a few Google image results and keyword searches. This is white woman, white child. In the first 2 pages, there is not a single white mother and white child. This is American inventors. I know a lot of people know about this one. Almost all are obscure and black. You have to scroll all the way through just to get to Bill Gates. There are similar results when you Google white women with children, white people, which returns images of Dylan Roof and anti-white rhetoric at the top, screw white people, white couple, and last but not least, and this one really gets me, happy American couple, which, by the way, returns the San Bernardino terrorists right at the top. I've heard a few somewhat feasible explanations surrounding this. People are saying that these specific terms are broken. One explanation is that Google Image uses search terms which are a reflection of the web page, and that's written by the web page author. So Google's explanation is that if there is a black inventor, an author is more likely to point out that they were black, since most American inventors are white, and there's really no need to mention it when they are. Okay, maybe this is true, that Google is just mirroring the existing racial slant within search results. But if I'm searching for something and my search results are wildly skewed and are not returning the most obvious results, then the search engine is not really doing its job, now is it? I don't think that these search criteria are absurd. They're very basic keywords. I also suppose that it's possible that this is some kind of troll from web page authors. This is a theory that I've read in some forums. And I do notice in my own Google results for Blonde in the Belly of the Beast that some of the first returning results are tiny, tiny blogs written forever ago that were barely viewed, have no comments. The search results often have no rhyme or reason. That being said, I'm also not very convinced that this can be entirely attributed to an algorithm. When you look at these images from keyword searches, it isn't just a few pages. It is in every one of these, like 90 to 95%, in some cases 100% of the first 3 or so pages. They return very skewed results. I'm no technological genius, but it seems to me that if they can control rankings by burying things that they deem to be fake news, and if they can tailor your shopping search rankings by using your data, that they can control the rankings of the search criteria for the search terms that I mentioned earlier. That means that even if this is some accidental thing, which I don't really believe that it is, it could surely be corrected by burying the mismatched first few pages of the search results. This, paired with the revelations after the James Damore firing that Google has clearly incorporated its leftist slant into its technology, leads me to believe that Google is taking their godlike presence in the tech market seriously and are literally trying to reshape our worldview, trying to form our perception to be what they think is more inclusive, especially as it pertains to race, which is why YouTube partnered with the ADL. We also know that built into the mission of the company is the understanding that privacy does not exist. And if we want to be private, then we should probably be reflecting on the morality of the things that we're doing privately.
Eric Schmidt is Google's CEO.
If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. But if you really need that kind of privacy, the reality is that search engines, including Google, do retain this information for some time.
I don't know about you, but I do not want a dogmatic billionaire leftist deciding what is and is not acceptable behavior for me on my own time. There are plenty of things that do not reflect on you morally that you still don't want people to know about. What about medical conditions? And you have a right to make that distinction without the judgment, interference, acceptance, or condemnation from a third-party corporation that's merely providing you a means to access publicly available information. I'm constantly hearing people say, Google is a private company, they can do whatever they want. I understand this, but there's a larger philosophical question that needs to be addressed. If your private business is to provide universal, unbiased information to all people, rich or poor, doesn't that change the nature of the private company? Isn't it more than that now? What if it's a giant company, potentially more powerful than the world's strongest country's government? And what if it is something that almost everyone uses for everything every day? Doesn't that change things as well? And what if they have all of our data and things were fine before now, but then they decided to start singling us out, shutting down our YouTube channels, and now putting our videos in limbo even when we have not violated their terms of service? We all knew this was coming after YouTube partnered with the ADL, but this is the first major video that I have heard about that has actually been put in a limited state. This is one of Jared Taylor's videos on race realism. I've linked it below. As you can see, you have to acknowledge that it is an offensive video to even pull up the page. Then it does not have views, likes, comments, and you cannot share it. And people that they deem racist or sexist using their insane, completely invented definition, after all, this guy is their poster boy for toxic masculinity, are going to be eliminated from their platforms one by one. They want to selectively choose who can be influential so that it reinforces their vision of a Marxist utopia. Google believes that they're creating a better world by changing how we see the world and how we interact with each other. And Google thinks that because of the dominant hold they have on the industry and because of their expansion into other industries, that consumers have no viable exit strategy and have to deal with whatever they dish out. At this point, at least for me, this is true. I'm subjected to the whims of YouTube, and I don't really expect my channel to be alive for much longer. I pretty much wake up every day and see if it's still there. But is your average person capable of abandoning Google in all of its forms without it interfering massively in their day-to-day life or their income stream? Everyone uses it. It feels like they own everything, and it is all somehow integrated. I can see why people think their power and reach is insurmountable. Amazon, Apple, and Google each spent record sums lobbying President Donald Trump and the rest of Washington, D.C. over the past 3 months, new federal records show, shelling out a combined $10 million to shape federal policy on everything from privacy to immigration reform. It is the most expensive quarter ever for these tech giants, many of which found themselves face-to-face with Trump in June as the White House commenced a new effort to modernize the inner workings of the U.S. government and tackle regulations around drones and other emerging technologies. But the biggest spender is still Google, which spent nearly $5.4 million to lobby Washington in the second quarter of 2017. As usual, the search and advertising giant focused its lobbying efforts on shaping self-driving car regulation, pushing for surveillance reforms, and addressing potential competition concerns in the nation's capital. Additionally, Google also has an official history working directly with the NSA and the federal government. They're not just a private company. They're deeply involved in the everyday activities of your average individual American. They're also deeply involved in academia and have partnered with the federal government. Worst of all, they're not even trying to hide their blatant activism and regularly use their huge amounts of advertising revenue to lobby for their political causes. Google is not the only company capable of innovation. This is true. There are some alternatives to Google. I've been using DuckDuckGo. I've also seen some other content creators cover this in depth, Computing Forever and a few others, and I've linked their very extensive, well-researched videos about how to replace Google and Google products below. But we have to see Google for the powerful enemy that it is. At this point in time, no other company can possibly hope to have the influence that Google has. They have amassed an unprecedented amount of wealth and global influence and have inserted themselves in governmental affairs of most countries. It is easy to get really conspiratorial really fast because here are the things that we do know about Google. We know that they try to influence the election through the manipulation of search rankings. We know that YouTube is silencing conservatives, particularly people that talk about race, and that the YouTube spotlight, which is constantly being shilled, is filled with propaganda about race, gender, immigration policy. We all remember their video, Proud to Be and Not Just a Refugee. They were famously downvoted, and YouTube spent a substantial amount of time censoring comments. This is well documented. I hate to say this because I don't have much faith or trust in the federal government, but the only solution that I can see here is that Google needs to be regulated like a public utility, at least temporarily. Because so much of our information passes through Google, we have to protect our First Amendment rights despite Google being a private company. This is truly an unprecedented situation, and it will be very difficult to navigate. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Is there another solution that I've overlooked? Do you think that the federal government needs to step in? Will that cause even worse long-term problems? And most importantly, what can we do to limit Google's power over us? Thanks, and I'll see you on Friday. Bye.